One of the things I mentioned in my journey through software engineering video is that I made some video games, and as you can probably guess by the title, I don't believe that I did all that well at job. However, it's important to acknowledge the work that taught you and brought you to the place where you are now. So in this video, I'm going to take a breakneck pace review through my obsession with developing creative ideas into video games. Let's start all the way back at me, somewhere around 11 to 12. I am obsessed with video games and consoles and have just seen this video by the YouTuber Nerdcubed on PlayStation Home. It's a GUI for the console, similar to Roblox but acting as a central hub and allowing users to launch games from the service. I was obsessed with this idea, believing that it was the future of technology and navigation of software. I feel I was both ahead of my time and so desperately out, from the history of 3D web browsing to future days of VR chat, Rec Room and Roblox. I do feel that the idea of experiencing things in 3D is highly interesting to people, but the compromise and convenience to novelty is often a trade-off that nobody wants to make. However, none of this occurred to me at my brain at 12, where I was determined to make a full console to give this experience. I worked on this conceptually a while, however I do not believe that I made any operational progress. Not surprising at all, given my age. But that didn't mean I was done making video games, so alongside a couple of close friends, thanks Chris and Max, we formed Gamehub Studios. By formed, I mean we used it as a front for messing around with projects. There's not much to say on this end. That's literally it. So let's jump ahead a couple months or years until a high school open day. In the IT sample lesson, we were told to design a video game with a couple small constraints. The setting was inside a computer, the genre was platformer, and the quirk was that you couldn't touch the floor. And with those design constraints, we designed processing power. A, quote, level-based platformer where you couldn't touch the circuit board floor. You had an electron gun based off the electron gun of a CRT display. It could create blocks that could hold only objects, or blocks that could hold only the player. End quote. I love the design of that, and I think that the electron gun concept is great. The problem here is that everyone involved was 13, and despite the strong efforts we put in, things didn't go well. We got a production prototype done, the game was just about playable, and we had pause and debug menus, despite building all of the code myself instead of using Unity pre-made assets, which would have expedited the project development so much more. But alas, that did not prove the only problem to plague the project. After a good year or so of development, including a surprising amount of level design and character art that never really made it to the development stages, I kept working on the basic mechanics of our blocks and movement, trying to handle bugs and find solutions. And then the whole project corrupted, and I didn't have a backup save, except for a few earlier versions of scripts. So I had to pretty much restart from scratch. We did keep trying to complete the project. We built new menus, updated the mechanics, and ultimately got a kind of playable level, but by this point it was too late. Our interest was waning, we were putting less and less time into it, and ultimately the project had to be shelved, which pretty much put the Gamehub Studios, into limbo, on the knife's edge between life and death. But that wouldn't last long. Here's a riddle for you. Take a 14-year-old me, put them in a boring chemistry class with a couple of their friends, one of them they have a comical in hindsight crush on. The 14-year-old me believes they have the knowledge and skills to program anything and everything, and the crush in question mentions that they had the idea to make a visual novel and that they had a good amount of story and art for it, but no way of producing it. You will never guess what happened next. So that's the story of Butterfly. It was the basis of code for a visual novel otomy that would allow for branching dialogue paths, had the same tendencies as any other story, and of course, I didn't know or realize that RenPy existed, so I built the basis for the game in Unity. I wrote a 1,000-line, a lot of that's due to inefficiencies, I will add, but still, script manager, save load systems, branching logic paths that mimic BASIC. I put so much of my time into this for the other person to ultimately not produce half of the stuff they needed to, and the game never left the technical proof of concept stage, which is probably not a bad thing given both of our skill sets. Now, save for a brief attempt at reviving Butterfly in a couple of years' time, I'm not even going to go into that one, There were and are a few other ideas that linger on, from early projects like Invasion of the Androids, my very first attempted project, which is basically a zombie survival game now I look at it in hindsight, but you're removing malware from robot phones, and blink and they all disappeared. It's just everybody's gone to the rapture, but instead of the heavy story, you just mess around a lot. There were later ideas as well that still sit for when I get bored one day, like Awkward Choices, a visual storytelling game where you make awkward choices. And 10 Second Slice, you're a ninja who can throw swords. You have 10 seconds to kill everything in the room. And lastly, an untitled project that was meant to be a simple top-down platformer that would delete itself and add registry keys, making you unable to play the game after you had died once. I was quite proud of that idea. But alas, none of these projects ever made it anywhere far, and that's probably a good thing because most of them were bad. I still like the idea of 10 Second Slice, so if anyone's watching who makes games, you can have that because I want to play it. These ideas all started fading away though, when we moved into lockdown. Ideas like 10 Second Slice and Awkward Choices were some of my early lockdown projects and ideas, but as I began developing service projects like Bbot, I found them much more creatively fulfilling and easy to complete on my own, something that is very difficult to do with video games. When you're making a game, you have to have artists, sound engineers, programmers, testers, producers, designers, so many skill sets and often so many people, with the success of the project dependent on everyone managing their own tasks. Ultimately though, I'm happy with the work that I and the people around me were able to complete, as I believe it allowed us to develop skill sets that became invaluable to us as we specialized out. With myself, I specialized out into software development and engineering, and one of my close friends went into independent game development. And you can find their itch.io page at spagev.itch.io for a couple games that I think are really good. Better than processing power anyway, but that's not a challenge. This experience in developing games helped me tangentially develop my system programming skills that I now offer in the work I complete daily, so consider hiring me. That ad read was a bit of a stretch. I'm looking for new clients for my software engineering business, Nickel Software, that builds commercial and personal software for any and all needs. From simple informational websites to responsive services with desktop integration. We're happy to provide and service websites, mobile apps, commercial desktop software, and server-side applications. For more information and contact details, please head to nickelsoft.co.uk. Thanks for your consideration.